I don't really watch a lot of shows or movies or read a lot of books on their own, but when I really like something, I like it a lot, and I rewatch it over and over until I'm sick of it. I really liked Steven Universe when I was younger, and I watched the whole 5 seasons at least 6 times. I love this horror podcast called the Magnus Archives, and I've listened to the whole thing around 5 times, not counting all the binges I started but never finished, but which is like 20 minutes an episode, 200 episodes, which is over a month of my life just on this podcast. And I have like 4,000 hours in The Sims, I think. Point is, it's a lot, and I dedicate a lot of time to those things, and I always try to get my friends to listen to them, but they almost never do. So I've compiled a list of my favorite comfort media across 6 different mediums. Like the title said. Bee and Puppy Cat is a web series that, so far, has about an hour of total content. It's about this early 20-something girl, Bee, and her alien roommate, Puppy Cat, taking temp jobs in space. All of the temp jobs are on different cool niche planets, like Jelly Cube Planet with this cute little gumball machine looking man and his even cuter doodle pets, and the whole planet has a little cherry on top that sucks out the souls of mortal men to feed to his cannibalistic livestock. Or Cathead Planet, which is a giant bathhouse / cat cafe where the customers are the cats and the humans are the pets. They also have one dog in a cat costume in the background, which is hilarious. This show is incredibly aesthetically pleasing and cozy, but under the surface, there are lots of themes of like depression, growing up, loss, etc. I really love it, and I can't wait for season 2. I think technically it was leaked a while back, but I'm just gonna watch it when it comes out on Netflix this year because, I don't know, I want to support the creators. I really want more of this show to be made. My favorite comfort show is Madoka Magica, which, if you know anything about Madoka Magica, you know it's not really a comfort show. It's about this group of young girls who make a wish with this cute, innocent little animal, Kyubey. In exchange, Kyubey makes you a magical girl, and it's now your duty to fight these witches. I just love the magical girl designs, the interesting powers, and the witches! God, the witches! The labyrinths all have these cool aesthetics. There's this paper puppet style that's really different from the rest of the show that a lot of their labyrinths use. They have cool familiars and music, and God, it's all just amazing! I wish I had the creativity to come up with something like that. Go into it blind if you don't know what happens, please. It's a story about choice and consequences, and it's also so much more than it looks like on the surface. Like, if you're going to watch it for the first time, I'd say wait until the end of episode 3 to decide how you feel about it, because, I mean, you'll know it when you see it. Okay, for movies, I have 2 comfort movies at the moment, and I just couldn't decide. So for the movie section, I have The Mitchells vs. the Machines and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which I'm now realizing have pretty similar titles. The Mitchells vs. the Machines is about a family trying to bond together by going on a road trip before their daughter Katie goes to college, and also it's the robot apocalypse. When I first saw the trailers for this, I thought it was going to be like, kids, you should stop using your dumb phones and just do whatever your parents want you to do because they're always right and your interests and opinions are meaningless because you're a child. And I only watched it because the same people who worked on Spider-Verse worked on this movie. But it's not like that. Katie's love of the internet and everything on it is treated as valid and even good, showing how she uses art to process her emotions and make connections, but her dad's desire to spend more time with her is also treated as valid. The relationships are just really strong, and I love the characters, especially Aaron and his weirdly adult voice that kind of fits him, actually. The characters are really deeply relatable, especially if you're like an art kid that your parents don't really understand your art, and also it's just really funny. Like, it's so funny. I'm not really an expert on comedy, but if a movie can make me cackle consistently out loud, alone in my room, loud enough to make my family and neighbors concerned, it is pretty good. The animation is really charming, the conflicts are reasonable, and you can really empathize with all parties, and I'm a sucker for family stuff, okay? Also, Katie is queer and has a girlfriend, if that does anything for you. I was sitting there kicking my feet in my bed, like, after I found out about that. And then Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is about this loser, Scott, trying to date this alternative, mysterious girl, Ramona. To do that, he has to defeat her 7 evil exes. Scott is kind of a bad person, and Ramona is also kind of a weird person, and there's this background thing about Scott's garage band, Sex Bomb, and his ex, Envy, who he's trying to get over. It's, like, incredibly funny, and it just takes random things and goes with it. Like, this guy has these superpowers because he's vegan, and he's defeated by drinking a latte. Or this actor has a legion of stunt doubles trying to fight Scott. The whole thing has great music and awesome video game visuals, especially for when it came out. I think it came out in 2010. And did I mention it was funny? So funny and very quotable. It's aged pretty well considering it's been 12 years. My comfort graphic novel is called The Prince and the Dressmaker, about a seamstress who makes dresses for Prince Sebastian, who secretly dresses as Lady Crystalia, this beautiful, influential fashion icon. With this graphic novel, I came for genderqueer representation and stayed for also genderqueer representation, but also cool characters, beautiful dresses, like, oh my god, I can see why the kingdom lost their shit over this, and super sweet relationships. I love fantasy and fairy tales, especially when they're a little queer. So if you Google it, there's about 35 pages available as preview. Just go read it. Just do it. Just because I said so. My comfort podcast, again, like Madoka Magica, comfort in kind of air quotes, is this eldritch horror tragedy disguised as an analog horror called the Magnus Archives. It's very popular if you're on Tumblr. Or at least it was like 2 years ago, which makes me sad. It follows Jonathan Sims, the most uptight, posh British skeptic ever, who, despite his supposed skepticism, works at an academic institute researching the supernatural called the Magnus Institute. He's promoted after his predecessor is murdered, and he has 3 assistants. Martin, a shy pushover type that John frankly chews out a lot. Tim, a flirty class clown character. Sasha, a super competent girl who probably would have made a better head archivist than John were this a normal archivist position. The podcast starts as a series of stories taking the form of statements from people who come to the Magnus Institute. As time goes on, you notice that some common threads are happening between statements, like haunted books or specific fears grouped together, like uncanny figures, loneliness associated with colder fogs, or the feeling of being watched. This is less of a coincidence than you'd think, and eventually the archivist and his assistants start seeing supernatural occurrences outside the confines of the statements they research, and the story spirals into a story about gods and apocalypses. I really like this podcast, partially because of the eldritch horror and the really cool world building, but also just the relationships and the characters. All the characters are relatable and sympathetic, or if they're not relatable and sympathetic, then just really fun. It's tragic watching your favorite characters be warped and twisted into shells of their former selves, but, you know, it's kind of fun to watch people suffer sometimes. It's also really funny. Like, horror tragedy, it's funny, somehow, like when it wants to be. Especially as time goes on and less emphasis gets put on statements and more is put on the wider scale and the people. I don't know, I'm not making sense right now, but I just love the Magnus Archives. It was a huge hyperfixation for like 2 or 3 years, and it probably kind of shows. My comfort book is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman, who you might know as the writer of Heartstopper. If you were/are a gifted kid, like you were in the gifted kid program and now you have a complex about it, or if you're like depressed, or even if you're just into the internet and like space, this is the book for you. It's about Frances, the head girl at her school. Her plan for life is just school, college, work, life, money, and then I'll be happy. It's actually depressing in a sort of relatable way, because, you know, that's what you're told is your only option, like school, work, life, you know? She puts on this facade of smart girl who's going to university and keeps things like her hobbies and personality hidden. She is secretly a huge fan of this podcast Universe City, which is all sci-fi and about this person, Radio Silence, working their way through a city filled with robots and monsters and neon. She draws fan art for the show, and then the creator asks her to really be on the show, like for real as an artist, and eventually even a voice actor. She learns that the creator is Alid Last, this really shy, quiet, frankly boring little dude. They become really amazing friends and do the show together and learn what they want to do with their lives. I just love this book so much. I have a poster. I'm obsessed. I know I mentioned for a lot of the stuff on this list, but they're also really relatable. Like, Yes, I'm also someone whose self-esteem hinges on praise and the things that I'm good at, and I also think that if I share too much of myself with others, they'll hate me. And I also love fiction, and I'm also a fan artist, and I have a weird relationship with my family, and I don't want to go to university, but I'm going to anyway because I was taught from a young age that what I like doesn't matter, and I should stop hoping since it isn't going to happen, and I give up on being happy, and I decided to go into a career I'd hate just to please those around me and fulfill their expectations of who they thought I was. And I like space and Welcome to Night Vale, so... I don't really know how to end this. Just listen to / watch / read all the things I talk about. They're good, and I created this whole avatar and video setup and 4-page script just so this video so you owe it to me. Don't question it. Just watch the hour or so of Bee and Puppy Cat, 2 hours of the Mitchells versus the Machines, 2 hours of Scott Pilgrim, 5-ish hours of The Prince and the Dressmaker, 8-ish hours of Radio Silence, 16 hours of Madoka Magica, and according to this editor, 90 hours of the Magnus Archives, which is like 124 hours of total content, which is more than 5 days straight of stuff with no breaks that I'm telling you to consume. More if you're a slow reader or use an audiobook for Radio Silence. You know what? Maybe don't listen to me, just draw your own conclusions.